"Step aside, little girl," Brooke said into the microphone. Her laugh echoed through the Harbor Light Hotel ballroom, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers. The edge of the heavy white envelope cut into my thumb. The paper felt too stiff, too cold against my sweating skin. Around me, the steady clinking of champagne flutes came to a dead stop. The thick scent of lilies mixed with my sister's expensive floral perfume, and the combination suddenly made it hard to breathe. I traced the raised seal of the Northbridge Reproductive Center hidden under the flap. A medical compliance auditor notices when a document tells a story it shouldn't. At 33, my name is Amanda Cole, and I spent my days hunting down fraudulent patient records. But absolutely nothing could have prepared me for the single sworn affidavit I held right now. Brooke stood on my engagement stage. My 36-year-old sister placed one manicured hand perfectly over her flat stomach, smiling brightly like she was handing out a precious gift to the crowd. The entire room fell completely silent. She had just announced that she was pregnant with my fiancé's child. Nathan stood near the edge of the stage. The man I was supposed to marry did not deny the pregnancy. He just looked at the floor, playing the tragic role of the reluctant sinner caught in a moment of passion. I looked at our mother. Marilyn's hands covered her mouth in shock, but her first glance darted straight to Brooke. She checked on her golden child instead of the daughter whose wedding was just destroyed. Nora, my best friend, started walking toward me from the back of the room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. I held up one hand and stopped her. I realized everyone in the banquet hall was waiting for my reaction. They expected me to cry, to slap my sister, or to run crying out of the double doors. Nathan even let out a small, visible breath. He was relieved, clearly thinking I was about to lose control and look like the crazy, jealous woman. He stepped closer, lowering his voice into that soft, reasonable tone he always used in court. "Amanda, I never meant for it to happen," Nathan whispered, just loud enough for the front tables to hear his apology. "I will explain everything privately, please." Brooke leaned into the microphone again, not willing to share the spotlight. "Love cannot be scheduled like a medical procedure, Amanda. That was the knife. Everyone in that room knew I had spent 5 years surviving cancer. They knew I had waited patiently for the exact medical clearance to finally start a family. I did not scream, and I did not cry. My fingertips were freezing, and my jaw ached so badly my teeth buzzed. I looked at the woman who shared my blood and asked exactly one question. "How many weeks?" Brooke beamed, rubbing her stomach again with that practiced maternal glow. 10 weeks. We just heard the heartbeat. I nodded. I walked toward the stage, my steps steady. Marilyn lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. Her fingernails dug deep into my skin. "Do not destroy this family," my mother hissed in my ear. I looked down at her hand. Then, I slowly peeled her fingers away, one by one. I stepped up to the podium. I did not announce my revenge. I just looked at my sister. "Thank you for answering that," I said into the mic. 10 weeks. I placed the thick envelope on the wooden podium. The heavy paper hit the wood with a sharp thud. Nathan stared at the document. He recognized the blue seal of his own fertility clinic on the corner. For the first time that night, his calm lawyer mask cracked. He took a panicked step back. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. "This is a sworn embryology chain of custody and incident affidavit," I said, my voice projecting loud and steady over the speakers. "Signed this morning." I skipped the medical jargon. I only read the 3 paragraphs that mattered to the people in this room. One, I read aloud. Embryo code ACNH03 was created using the genetic material of Amanda Cole and Nathan Hale. A chair scraped violently against the floor. Someone in the second row gasped. 2. The embryo was thawed and transferred without the valid, verified consent of Amanda Cole. A glass shattered near the back of the room. 3. The recipient of the transfer was Brooke Cole. Brooke's smug smile vanished instantly. Her face drained of all color, turning a sickly gray. She snatched at the microphone, her voice shrill and desperate. "She is lying. She made that up." I slid a certified copy across the podium, pointing directly to the clinic director's signature and the internal investigation case number printed at the top. Nathan turned toward the exit, his eyes searching for an escape. 2 hotel security guards stepped in front of the double doors, crossing their arms. I had already asked hotel management to block them, knowing the police were on their way to collect the original document. Marilyn shoved past a table, screaming at the top of her lungs. "You are hurting the baby, Amanda! Stop it right now!" I looked at my mother, then at the man who had stolen my future, and finally at my sister. "The baby is the only innocent person in this room," I said. Brooke backed away from me, her chest heaving as she struggled to breathe. She did not look at our mother, and she did not look at the shocked crowd. She turned her panicked eyes directly to Nathan and screamed, "You promised she would never find the transfer record." 18 days before the banquet, I stood in my kitchen holding a piece of mail that made my stomach turn. The envelope bore the blue medical seal of the Northbridge Reproductive Center. I slid the invoice out and smoothed the stiff paper flat against the cold granite counter. The rich smell of my morning coffee suddenly turned sour. I stared at the line item for annual storage fees, running my finger across the printed table. Last year, the quantity column said 1. Today, it said 0. A memory hit me, sharp and entirely uninvited. The heavy smell of hospital antiseptic. Nathan gripping my hand by my hospital bed right before my first round of chemotherapy, looking into my eyes and promising we would use embryo code ACNH03 when I was completely ready. The front door unlocked, and the deadbolt clicked loudly. My fiancé walked in carrying a brown paper bag of Thai takeout, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door. I held up the invoice, trying to keep my jaw from trembling. I told him the clinic had sent a bill, and it said we had no embryos in storage. Nathan did not drop his coat, and he did not rush over to read the paper in my trembling hand. Instead, the man I was supposed to marry just sighed. He set the food on the table with slow, deliberate movements. He told me the billing department was always making mistakes. He stepped closer and rubbed my shoulders, his voice taking on that soft, patronizing tone he usually saved for difficult clients. He whispered that I was spiraling again, gently reminding me of the health anxiety I struggled with after my cancer treatments. He made it sound like my panic was a burden he was bravely carrying, but a cold thought slipped into my mind. I had not mentioned which clinic sent the mail, yet he already knew exactly who to blame. I wanted to believe him, but my daily job involved tracking data discrepancies for a major insurance company. I opened my laptop on the dining table and went straight to the patient portal. A security prompt popped up on the screen, trying to send a verification text to a phone number I had stopped using 2 years ago. My fingers froze over the keyboard. I never forget to update my contact files. After spending 20 agonizing minutes answering security questions to recover the account, the dashboard finally loaded. The status line next to our only viable embryo did not say destroyed. It said transferred. My pulse hammered in my ears as I dialed the clinic. A woman named Celeste Ward answered the phone. Her voice sounded incredibly bored, carrying the kind of flat customer service tone designed to make you feel like an inconvenience. She called it a simple migration error, typing loudly on her end of the line. I asked her to email me written confirmation that the physical embryo was still safely sitting in the frozen storage tank. Celeste refused. She claimed it would take 48 hours to process a written request. I gripped the phone tighter and told her I needed the chain of custody log right now. The typing stopped. Complete silence stretched over the line for 3 full seconds. The boredom completely vanished from her voice as she asked what exactly I did for a living. Nathan found me staring blankly at the wall an hour later. He sat down across from me and reached for my hand. He suggested quietly that maybe we should postpone the engagement party. He said I needed rest, and he did not want me looking exhausted in front of all our important guests. He cared more about the optics of a party than our missing child. Before I could argue, my cell phone buzzed on the table. It was Nora. My best friend sounded confused, asking why my older sister Brooke had just called the bridal boutique to rush the alterations on her bridesmaid dress. Brooke had sworn up and down for weeks that she was skipping the party. I waited until Nathan went to sleep that night. Then, I pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing a timeline by hand. I am not a computer hacker, and I did not break into any locked systems. I just looked at the basic security log on my own patient account. The system recorded the exact date and time someone had changed my verification number. I compared that timestamp to my desk calendar. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of a weekend when Nathan claimed he was in Chicago for a deposition. The security log also captured an IP address. I checked our home router settings and wrote down the string of digits. They matched perfectly. I walked softly into our bedroom and stood at the foot of the mattress. Nathan was breathing heavily, deep in sleep, completely unaware that I was watching him. I thought about the timestamp. Then, I looked over at the desk in the corner of the room. His work laptop was still open, the screen glowing softly in the dark. The change had been made from our house. While Nathan claimed he was 3 states away, Nora drove me to downtown Boston the next morning. The inside of her car smelled heavily of peppermint and stale coffee, and neither of us spoke much during the ride. She took me straight to a lawyer she knew from her own divorce. Tessa Grant sat behind a massive oak desk, listening to my story without showing a single ounce of pity. The attorney did not offer me a tissue, and I liked her immediately for that. Tessa leaned forward and asked me 3 simple questions. She wanted to know exactly what I had signed, who possessed access to my medical accounts, and what I needed to protect most. I told her I wanted to protect the embryo first, and then I wanted the truth. Tessa shook her head slightly. She explained we had to protect the digital footprints first, because the clinic was already hiding something. Within an hour, her assistant sent out a formal legal preservation letter demanding the Northbridge Reproductive Center freeze all their emails, camera footage, and audit logs. Reading the phrase "potential unauthorized transfer" printed in bold black ink made my stomach flip, and a cold sweat broke out along my hairline. Tessa handed me a glass of water, warning me firmly not to confront Nathan yet. If I tipped him off, the evidence could disappear completely. I agreed, still stubbornly believing my fiancé was just covering up a medical accident to protect my feelings. We met the clinic staff at 2 o'clock that afternoon. The conference room felt like a refrigerator. Celeste Ward sat rigidly next to the clinic attorney, looking incredibly professional in a tailored gray suit. Dr. Priya Shah, the head embryologist, sat at the far end of the long glass table. She kept her eyes glued to her legal pad. Celeste spoke in a smooth, practiced voice. The clinic director pushed the idea of a simple data migration error, suggesting 2 patient files had unfortunately merged during a software update. She used a lot of technical administrative words, trying to make the situation sound like a routine software glitch. I leaned across the table and interrupted her. I asked Dr. Shah if my physical embryo was still sitting in the frozen storage tank. The head embryologist did not answer. Dr. Shah just looked at me, her eyes completely filled with shame, and that agonizing silence confirmed my worst nightmare. The embryo was gone. The clinic lawyer quickly slid a piece of paper across the table. He said they possessed a signed transfer authorization, meaning the clinic had followed proper procedure. I pulled the document closer, staring at the ink. It was my name, but my stomach dropped to the floor. The signature had a very specific, awkward loop on the capital letter A. I had stopped signing my name that way over 4 years ago, right after Nathan and I bought our house in Brookline. The only place that exact signature existed was on our old closing documents, and my fiancé kept those high-resolution scans on his personal hard drive. Celeste insisted the signature had been properly verified through their secure patient portal. At the far end of the table, a young compliance worker named Jordan suddenly looked down at her hands, completely avoiding my gaze. The heavy oak door swung open, and Nathan walked right into the room. He looked out of breath, claiming Celeste had called him because he was legally considered a co-owner of the genetic material. My fiancé walked straight toward my chair, resting a heavy hand on my shoulder. His voice sounded tight, urging me to step outside before the lawyers turned a heartbreaking clinic error into a public scandal. Tessa watched him carefully. She asked my fiancé how he knew it was a clinic error before he had even looked at the file on the table. Nathan blinked, his polite smile faltering for just a fraction of a second. He answered entirely too fast, claiming Celeste had explained the whole situation to him over the phone. The meeting ended with Tessa demanding the raw data logs. As we filed out into the hallway, the young compliance worker brushed past my shoulder. Jordan did not say a word, but she slipped a small, stiff business card directly into my palm. Nora drove me back to my neighborhood, and I waited until I was completely alone in her parked car before flipping the card over. A handwritten note on the back told me to ask for the original verification log instead of the summary file. My hands shook as I dialed the cell phone number printed on the front. Jordan answered on the second ring. She spoke in a rushed whisper, explaining that summary logs could be easily edited to look perfectly normal, but the backup server always captured the exact truth. The compliance officer had pulled the original data history that morning, and she confirmed my patient account had never sent an automated signature verification. I asked her how the clinic system accepted a forged document without triggering a security alert. Jordan took a deep breath, and her next words shifted the entire room. Someone overrode the consent warning with Celeste Ward's personal credentials. Tessa had ordered me to go home and change absolutely nothing about my evening routine until she secured a formal preservation order. Walking through my own front door took every ounce of acting skill I possessed. The rich smell of roasting garlic and butter hit me immediately. Nathan stood by the stove, casually stirring a pan of risotto while wearing his favorite gray sweater. The absolute normalcy of the domestic scene made my stomach physically turn. I realized my fiancé was testing me, waiting to see exactly how much I knew. I forced my muscles to relax, dropping my keys into the ceramic bowl and giving him a tired smile. I sat at the kitchen island and told him I was just exhausted from the stress of the clinic making such a horrible administrative mistake. Nathan handed me a glass of wine, his shoulders dropping in visible relief. He kissed the top of my head and seamlessly shifted the conversation to our wedding plans, asking about the floral arrangements we needed to approve by Friday. I swallowed a sip of the bitter wine, nodding along while he built a future he had already destroyed. Right before we went to sleep, the man lying next to me asked a seemingly random question. He wanted to know if I still had my old broken cell phone, claiming he wanted to find some pictures from our first trip to the mountains. My pulse jumped, but I kept my breathing completely even. I reminded him that my mother had tossed that broken device into a junk drawer at her house when Marilyn helped us move 2 years ago. In the dark room, Nathan let out a soft hum of acknowledgement, and he seemed entirely too interested in a piece of broken electronics. The next morning, I sat across from Tessa in her downtown office, staring at a laptop screen alongside Jordan. The young compliance officer had securely accessed the backup server logs. Jordan explained how the verification security phone number on my medical portal had been changed. Someone had requested a digital recovery code, and that code went directly to the shared household email account Nathan managed for our utility bills. I gripped the edge of the heavy mahogany desk. Jordan pulled up the upload history for the forged transfer packet. Every computer leaves a unique digital shadow when it connects to a secure network, and the device fingerprint on that upload matched my fiancé's work laptop perfectly. The metadata attached to the fake authorization form was even worse. The digital file had been created by a specialized legal software registered entirely under Nathan's name. The author field was wiped clean, but the document version history still contained an original file name with the initials AC and NH. Someone had copied a high-resolution scan of my signature directly from the closing documents of our house. I suddenly remembered sitting in a real estate office 4 years ago, listening to Nathan praise me for signing my name the exact same way, every single time. The man who held my hand through chemotherapy had used my own consistency to steal my future. That evening, Nathan tried to close his trap. He came home early, pulling a printed document from his leather briefcase. He claimed the clinic wanted us to sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a full refund of our storage fees. The lawyer looked me right in the eyes and promised our embryo was perfectly safe in a secondary storage tank. I asked him who exactly had offered this deal. His confident smile faltered slightly, and he switched his answer midway from Celeste Ward to the clinic's legal counsel. I stared at the blue ink stain on the cuff of his crisp white shirt, realizing he was fully prepared to make me sign away my rights for a lie. The final piece of the puzzle arrived the following afternoon. Dr. Shaw called Tessa on a secure speakerphone line, her voice tight with professional shame. The head embryologist confirmed that embryo code ACNH03 had indeed been thawed and transferred about 7 weeks and 2 days ago. The procedure was completely successful. When you calculate the standard timeline before an in vitro fertilization procedure, that specific date meant the resulting pregnancy would be right around 10 weeks along. I asked who received my child. Dr. Shaw hesitated, explaining that the recipient was heavily encoded in the temporary legal affidavit to protect patient privacy. However, the embryologist confirmed the woman listed on the file had a direct family relationship to me. My mind immediately flashed to Marilyn, but my mother was in her 60s. The biology simply did not make any sense. I had not even considered the other option yet. Tessa reached into a manila folder and slid a printed security photograph across her desk. The grainy camera footage showed the Northbridge Reproductive Center lobby. A woman walked closely beside Nathan, her face turned away from the camera lens as they approached the front desk together. I stopped breathing. I knew that beige wool coat. I had bought it for Brooke last Christmas. The smell of steamed silk and expensive lavender room spray filled the bridal boutique. A seamstress dropped a handful of silver pins, and they scattered across the hardwood floor with a sharp clatter. Brooke stood on the velvet viewing pedestal in the center of the room. My older sister wore a loose emerald gown, completely ignoring the fitted styles she usually loved to flaunt. Nora offered us both glasses of champagne from a silver tray. Brooke simply covered the rim of her crystal flute with her palm and smiled politely at the boutique staff. "Hormone issues," my sister explained smoothly, adjusting her wide sleeve. As the expensive fabric slipped down her arm, a small square bandage peeked out from the crook of her elbow. It was the classic mark of morning blood work. I stared at the beige wool coat draped over the boutique sofa, recognizing the exact garment from the clinic security photo, and forced my face to remain completely blank. Brooke caught my eye in the massive floor mirror. She tilted her head, casually asking if I had ever thought about having someone else carry a baby for me. The golden child of our family added that if a woman cannot use what she has, her loved ones should step in to decide her future. I gripped the edge of the velvet sofa, keeping my voice painfully steady. "Would you carry my child if I asked?" Brooke turned around and smoothed the front of her dress. "I would carry a child that was meant to survive." 2 hours later, I sat in Tessa's downtown law office, with Nora pacing anxiously by the window. My best friend recalled how Brooke used to vanish for weeks at a time, always claiming she was attending exclusive spa retreats. Tessa did not need to access sealed medical files to find the truth, because the financial records painted a perfectly clear picture. Bank statements legally pulled from Nathan's accounts showed thousands of dollars in payments for expensive fertility medications, all charged to a hidden credit card. Brooke could successfully carry a pregnancy, but her own cycles had repeatedly failed to create a healthy embryo. The attorney turned her computer monitor toward us, pulling up the security footage from the Northbridge Reproductive Center. A silent video played on the screen, showing Nathan and Brooke walking through the clinic doors together. My fiancé wore a baseball cap pulled low, but the parking garage scanner had already logged his license plate. Brooke signed the guest register using the fake name Brianna Cole. A moment later, Celeste Ward bypassed the regular nursing staff, coming down to the lobby to personally escort them to the back rooms. The paper trail only grew worse from there. Nathan wired a massive consulting fee to a small shell company owned entirely by the clinic director. 2 days after that wire transfer cleared, Celeste paid off a crushing credit card debt. Brooke had also made a recent purchase to celebrate her success. A custom jeweler charged Nathan's hidden card for a heavy gold bracelet, deeply engraved with a due date that matched our embryo transfer timeline perfectly. I wanted to march straight back to that bridal boutique and tear the emerald dress to shreds. Tessa held up a hand, warning me that confronting them now would destroy our entire case. The legal preservation order had finally forced Nathan's cellular provider to release his cloud backups, and the recovered text messages proved my sister was never a victim. Nathan had not tricked Brooke into thinking I gave my permission. She had orchestrated the entire theft. "I will not go through another failed cycle," Brooke had texted him 3 months ago. "Use the good one." My fiancé replied a minute later, promising that once the transfer worked, Amanda could not undo it. Celeste chimed into the group thread next, assuring the couple she could easily clear the consent warning in the medical system. The final message came from my sister, sent on the exact day her pregnancy test came back positive. She had her chance. My chest tightened so hard I could barely pull in a breath. I reached for my cell phone, ready to call Brooke and demand an answer for her betrayal. Tessa gently pushed my hand down against the heavy oak desk. The lawyer pointed to the very last message on the screen, sent by my sister just yesterday afternoon. "She wants to announce the pregnancy on your engagement stage." The heavy glass door of Tessa's office clicked shut behind a courier. He had just delivered a sealed envelope containing Dr. Priya Shah's signed incident affidavit. The laboratory had officially verified the broken chain of custody. My lawyer slid the paperwork across her massive desk, warning me that this document only proved an unauthorized transfer, not automatic parental rights. I did not care about winning a custody battle in family court today. My only goal was to stop Nathan and Brooke from writing the very first version of this history. Nora sat on the leather sofa near the window, asking quietly if I really wanted to walk into that banquet hall tonight. I reached into my purse, pulled out the clinic storage invoice with the word 0 printed on it, and placed it inside the envelope next to a faded photograph bearing embryo code ACNH03. 2 hours before the party, my mother let herself into my bedroom, Marilyn smoothed the front of her expensive navy dress, hovering near my vanity mirror while I pinned my hair up. The woman who raised me already knew Brooke was pregnant with my fiancé's child, but she pretended to be completely ignorant about how that child was conceived. She begged me to just let my sister make her announcement on stage, suggesting I could quietly excuse myself afterward to save face and keep the peace. I looked at her reflection in the mirror and asked exactly how many weeks along my sister was. My mother answered without thinking, giving me a timeline that proved she had known about this pregnancy for months. Then, Marilyn placed a warm hand on my shoulder, whispering that at least the baby would stay in the family. After she left the room, I stood alone in my bathroom. The white engagement dress hung over the shower door, completely pristine. I traced the small, faded scar just below my collarbone, right where my chemotherapy port used to sit. For 5 years, I had convinced myself that surviving cancer meant I owed Nathan my entire life, just for staying by my side when I was sick. A cold clarity finally washed through my chest, replacing the fear I had carried for weeks. I unclasped the silver bracelet he had bought me during my second round of radiation and left it sitting on the cold marble counter. Walking into the Harborlight Hotel ballroom felt like stepping onto a stage built for my own execution. The crystal chandeliers cast long shadows over the white tablecloths, and the air buzzed with the sound of 100 guests waiting for a celebration. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Scanning the perimeter of the room, I spotted Celeste Ward standing near the exit doors, sipping champagne as Nathan's invited guest. When Brooke finally grabbed the microphone and proudly announced the pregnancy, the clinic director slowly began backing toward the lobby. But Tessa had already forwarded a certified copy of the affidavit to the state investigators hours ago, meaning no one in this room could steal the original document from my hands and bury the truth. My sister's scream echoed through the silent banquet hall right after I read the clinic statement. "You promised she would never find the transfer record," Brooke shouted, glaring at Nathan with wild, panicked eyes. The lawyer scrambled onto the stage, grabbing Brooke by the arm and pulling her away from the microphone, loudly insisting to the crowd that she was just suffering from severe pregnancy shock. Near the back doors, Celeste turned to run, but Jordan, the compliance officer, stepped directly into her path, silently pointing the clinic director out to a plainclothes investigator. Then, a sharp sting exploded across my left cheek. Marilyn stood right in front of me, her hand still raised, screaming that I was going to cause my sister to suffer a miscarriage. I tasted copper in my mouth, but I kept my hands firmly at my sides. Nathan realized his calm facade was completely useless now. He raised his voice over the murmuring crowd, declaring to the entire room that I had abused my position as a corporate auditor to illegally hack into a secure medical database. Brooke started sobbing hysterically, burying her face in her hands and crying that she had only agreed to the procedure because Nathan swore he had my permission. I pulled my cell phone from my clutch and read her text message aloud. "Use the good one." My sister shrieked that the message was taken out of context. The investigator stepped forward through the crowd, flashing a silver badge, and calmly asked Nathan to hand over his personal cell phone. The man who had managed all my passwords swallowed hard, claiming he had lost his device earlier that afternoon. The investigator nodded slowly, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. The detective then asked exactly where they might find the old, broken cell phone Nathan had used to receive my medical verification codes. Marilyn stopped screaming. The color drained from her face, leaving her skin looking like ash. For the first time that night, my mother looked more frightened than Brooke. The glaring white light of my cell phone screen burned my eyes in the dim kitchen. I stared at the looping video, listening to the tiny, distorted sound of my sister's voice playing through the speaker. Someone had uploaded a clip of the banquet, but the footage was perfectly sliced. The video showed Brooke proudly announcing her pregnancy, followed immediately by my mother slapping my face. The entire part where I read the sworn clinic document had been completely edited out. I scrolled down with a shaking thumb, reading a tabloid headline that called the disaster a sister's fertility feud. Nathan had already released a polished public statement through a crisis management firm. The attorney claimed I was suffering from severe emotional trauma following my cancer battle, suggesting I had tragically misinterpreted routine medical data. I grabbed my car keys, ready to drive straight to the local news station and hand them the original affidavit. Tessa called me before I reached the front door, firmly ordering me to stay inside. The lawyer reminded me that interfering with an active criminal investigation would only give Nathan exactly what he wanted. By noon, my career began to unravel. The human resources director at my insurance company called. Her voice tight and uncomfortably formal. She informed me I was being placed on immediate administrative leave with pay. Nathan had anonymously reported me to my corporate ethics board, accusing me of using my professional auditing skills to illegally access confidential patient records. My inbox went completely silent, and the coworkers who usually texted me every morning suddenly stopped reaching out. Nora showed up an hour later with a cardboard tray of black coffee, setting it down on my kitchen island. She wrapped her arms around my shoulders and whispered that staying quiet temporarily was not the same thing as surrendering. Her words offered a brief comfort, but the real blow landed later that afternoon. Brooke posted a new video to her social media accounts. My older sister sat on our mother's familiar floral sofa, holding her stomach and weeping softly into the camera lens. She told thousands of strangers that I had always been jealous because she was healthy enough to carry a child. Marilyn sat right beside her, patting Brooke's knee, and begging the public for compassion during a difficult family time. Watching my mother publicly choose the daughter who had stolen my future made my chest cave in, leaving a hollow ache beneath my ribs. A heavy, authoritative knock rattled my front door the next morning. 2 city detectives stood on my porch holding a limited search warrant, requesting access to my electronic devices. Tessa arrived 20 minutes later and advised me to cooperate fully, confident the digital logs would easily clear my name. I sat on the living room sofa while a forensic technician mirrored my laptop hard drive. Suddenly, the technician frowned, pulling up a hidden folder buried deep within my system files. The folder contained Brooke's private medical records. I had never seen those documents in my life, but the creation timestamp proved they were downloaded to my machine shortly after the banquet. My stomach dropped into a bottomless pit. Nathan had prepared a devastating counterattack. Tessa hired an independent digital expert to comb through the wreckage, and the truth he uncovered was absolutely terrifying. The trap had been set before I even knew I was being hunted. 3 days before the engagement party, while Nathan was still living in my house, he had logged onto our home network using his local administrator profile. Without my knowledge, he quietly reconnected my laptop to a dormant cloud storage account I had abandoned years ago. Because the connection was established from the administrator level, my computer never notified me about the auto-sync feature. After the disastrous banquet, someone uploaded the fake medical files to that old cloud account. My laptop simply did what it was secretly programmed to do, silently pulling the documents down in the background. The upload originated from a device tied to my old verification number. I remembered the broken cell phone sitting in a junk drawer at my mother's house. Tessa dialed Marilyn immediately, asking about the device. My mother stammered, sharply denying she had any of my old electronics, and hung up the phone. She was lying, and we quickly found the proof. Tessa's investigator pulled the security footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera across the street from Marilyn's house. The black and white video showed Nathan pulling into my mother's driveway late at night, just hours after the banquet ended. He did not need to touch my laptop ever again. He just needed to use the old phone on Marilyn's wireless network to upload the forged files. The same camera caught Marilyn the following morning. She walked to her car carrying a small plastic bin, driving straight to a community electronic recycling center. Armed with that timeline, Tessa secured a warrant for the recycling facility. The police recovered the old cell phone from a sorting bin late that afternoon. The screen was heavily cracked, but the internal memory remained perfectly intact. I stood in the police precinct observation room, holding my breath as the digital technician powered the broken device on. The screen flickered a dull blue, immediately loading an undeleted text message sent from Marilyn to Nathan. "I did what you asked. Now make Amanda stop." The police technician pulled a wealth of buried data from the cracked device. Recovery logs painted a devastating picture of my former fiancé. Nathan had used that exact phone to intercept my medical verification codes and hijack my patient portal. The internal memory held high-resolution scans of my forged signature, a draft of the transfer packet, and a clear history of logins to my old cloud account. Network upload logs proved beyond any doubt that the fake medical files were pushed to the cloud from this device right after the banquet. The forensic timeline perfectly matched the moment Nathan secretly re-enabled the automatic sync from our home network 3 days before the party. A chilling voice memo sat near the bottom of the digital folder. Nathan's calm, measured voice instructed our mother to turn the phone on, wait for the upload bar to finish, remove the SIM card, and throw the hardware away. When confronted with the audio file, Marilyn wept openly in the precinct lobby, swearing she only wanted to protect Brooke from the stress of a scandal. Tessa did not offer her a tissue. The lawyer pointed out that protecting one daughter apparently required framing the other for a federal cybercrime. My mother showed up at my front door alone the very next morning. The woman who raised me looked frail, her expensive clothes hanging loosely over her shoulders as she stepped into my foyer. She wrung her hands together, begging me to consider the child. Brooke could lose the baby if the stress sent her to prison, Marilyn pleaded, her voice trembling. I stared at the woman I once trusted more than anyone. I told her the child did not belong to Brooke to be used as a human shield. Marilyn reached into her designer handbag. She offered to sell her house in Newton, promising to wire me the entire profit if I just formally withdrew my witness statement. My fingers slipped into my jacket pocket, pressing a small button on a digital recorder Tessa had told me to carry at all times. I asked my mother exactly what she was trying to purchase with the sale of her home. The silence stretched thick and heavy across the hallway. Marilyn's eyes widened as she stared at the square shape in my pocket, realizing a second too late that she had just committed felony witness tampering. The dominoes began to fall in rapid succession. Downtown at the prosecutor's office, Celeste Ward lost her confident smirk. The backup server logs proved the clinic director had manually bypassed the consent warnings 3 separate times. The consulting fee wired from Nathan, combined with her after-hours badge swipes, completely destroyed her defense of simple administrative negligence. The final blow came when investigators showed Celeste a stack of text messages Nathan had selectively saved to paint her as the sole mastermind. Realizing her wealthy client was throwing her under the bus, the director immediately cut a deal. She traded her silence for a reduced sentence, officially confirming Nathan engineered the theft and that Brooke sat right beside him during the planning meetings. My sister lost her ultimate prize later that afternoon. Financial disclosures handed over during the criminal discovery process revealed Nathan's true exit strategy. My former fiancé had been quietly moving money into a private offshore account for months. He had already signed a lease for a luxury apartment in Colorado and drafted his law firm resignation letter. A saved draft email outlined his plan to completely separate from both of the Cole sisters the moment the baby was born. Nathan only needed Brooke to stay pregnant long enough to prevent me from taking legal control of the embryo. Brooke called me from an unknown number at twilight. The sweet, victimized tone she used for the media was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, jagged rasp. She blamed Nathan for everything, demanding I take the stand and testify that she genuinely believed I had given my consent. I listened to her panicked breathing, asking calmly why she typed the words, "Use the good one," if she thought I had agreed to the procedure. My sister finally cracked. The truth spilled out in a bitter rush. She screamed that I had always gotten everything, from my academic awards to the endless ocean of pity and attention our mother showered on me during my cancer treatments. Brooke admitted she hated watching me survive and thrive, while her own body failed to create a healthy pregnancy. "You did not want my life," I answered softly, standing alone in my dark kitchen. "You wanted proof you could take it." I ended the call and let the silence settle over the house. 2 hours later, my cell phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a local hospital switchboard. Brooke had spiraled into a severe panic attack after reading Nathan's financial disclosures, sending her blood pressure skyrocketing to dangerous levels. The triage nurse explained that my sister had never updated her emergency contact forms from years ago. My name was still listed at the very top. I drove to the medical center, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The fluorescent lights of the emergency ward buzzed overhead as a tired physician in green scrubs finally pushed through the swinging double doors. The doctor looked down at his chart, pulling off his surgical mask. "Brooke is stable. The baby is not in immediate danger. But she has gone into labor 6 weeks early." The harsh smell of industrial bleach coated the back of my throat as I stepped off the hospital elevator. I stood near the heavy double doors of the maternity ward, refusing to cross the threshold into the delivery area. Brooke held the legal right to dictate who entered her medical room, and my anger did not magically override her bodily autonomy. Marilyn paced the waiting area, her heels clicking aggressively against the scuffed linoleum floor. My mother stopped right in front of me, pointing a trembling finger at my chest, and loudly blamed my legal crusade for sending my sister into early labor. Nora stepped between us, reminding the older woman that the clinic director had already confessed to the entire criminal plot. I completely ignored the argument. Finding the hospital social worker standing near the main desk, I clearly stated that under no circumstances should the staff use me as an emergency decision-maker for the patient in labor. Tessa arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a thick leather briefcase. The attorney pulled me aside, explaining we could file an aggressive emergency motion for temporary custody the moment the baby was delivered. I watched a tired nurse rush past us carrying a stack of tiny blankets, and a profound realization settled into my bones. I turned to my lawyer and shook my head. I told Tessa to petition the family court for an independent guardian ad litem instead. I did not demand the judge hand over my baby like a piece of stolen property. I asked the court to give this child someone whose only job was protecting her from the absolute wreckage of our family. A baby girl arrived shortly after midnight. Because she was born 6 weeks early, the neonatal intensive care unit immediately took over her medical supervision. I stood in the darkened hallway outside the nursery, pressing my palm against the cold viewing glass. The tiny infant slept inside a clear plastic incubator, hooked to a series of delicate monitors that beeped in a steady, reassuring rhythm. She knew absolutely nothing about stolen passwords, forged signatures, or the bitter war raging just outside the hospital walls. Brooke refused to allow me into her recovery room, and I accepted her boundary without a single fight. My sister's medical rights remained completely intact, even if her freedom was about to end. The family court issued a mandatory genetic testing order the following morning. A week later, the sealed laboratory results formally confirmed the undeniable truth. Nathan and I were the sole genetic parents of the little girl. However, biology alone did not automatically resolve the custody nightmare. Sitting in her downtown office, Tessa patiently explained how the legal system worked. Because the forged transfer documents were completely void, Brooke possessed no valid gestational carrier agreement. The judge would evaluate the original intent of our embryo creation contract, the massive criminal fraud, and the guardian's report on the child's best interests. Nathan immediately petitioned to have his name placed on the birth certificate to maintain his leverage over me. The judge swiftly denied his arrogant request, restricting the disgraced lawyer's access due to his documented flight risk and the pending federal charges. 2 days before Brooke was scheduled to be discharged, a nurse handed me a handwritten note. My sister finally wanted to see me. I walked into her private recovery room, bracing myself for another screaming match. Brooke sat up in the hospital bed, her face pale and exhausted without her usual flawless makeup. She stared at her empty hands, whispering that feeling the baby grow inside her had been completely real. The golden child of our family begged me to tell the prosecutors that Nathan had entirely tricked her about the consent forms. She wanted me to lie under oath to save her from a prison sentence. A heavy, suffocating weight settled in my chest as I looked at the woman who had stolen my future. I refused to commit perjury for her, but I made her one single promise before turning toward the door. I swore I would never tell the little girl in the incubator that her very existence was a crime. Marilyn cornered me near the elevator bank on my way out of the ward. My mother grabbed my sleeve, her voice cracking as she pleaded with me to drop the parentage lawsuit completely. She claimed Brooke desperately needed a reason to live, essentially asking me to surrender my child to fix my sister's broken life. I pulled my arm away, the fabric of my coat slipping easily from her desperate grasp. I asked the woman who raised me if she had ever loved me without needing me to sacrifice something first. Marilyn stared at the polished floor tiles, completely silent. That terrible silence answered every question I ever had. I told her any future communication would have to go through my attorney, and I stepped onto the elevator alone. The guardian ad litem met me in the courthouse hallway the next morning, holding a thick stack of reports. She adjusted her glasses, offering a tight, sympathetic smile. The judge is prepared to name you the child's legal mother. But first, you will have to testify against every member of your family. The heavy oak doors of the district courthouse closed behind me, sealing the stale, air-conditioned room. A defense attorney paced across the worn carpet, stopping right in front of the witness stand to adjust his expensive silk tie. The man asked if I was simply punishing his client for a romantic affair, trying to paint me as a bitter, discarded woman. I leaned closer to the microphone, letting my voice carry through the silent gallery. An affair ended my engagement, I explained calmly. But forging a medical signature and stealing a frozen embryo created a federal felony. The lawyer pressed harder, accusing me of treating a child like stolen property. I kept my gaze fixed entirely on Nathan. I told the judge that embryo code ACNH03 was never just property to me, yet the legal right to decide its future belonged strictly to the people who signed the original creation contract. When asked about my anger, I freely admitted under oath that I had wanted my sister to hurt exactly the way I did. But the crucial difference was that I completely refused to act on that dark impulse. The overwhelming mountain of evidence did exactly what Tessa predicted, dismantling every single lie the defense tried to construct. Dr. Priya Shah took the stand first, verifying the broken chain of custody with quiet, professional dignity. Jordan followed her, projecting the original audit logs onto a large screen for the jury to read. A digital forensics expert broke down the metadata, explicitly linking the forged authorization file to the specific device fingerprint of Nathan's work laptop. A bank representative verified the massive consulting fee wired directly to Celeste Ward. Finally, the former clinic director herself confirmed the illegal system override, testifying that both Nathan and Brooke fully understood the consent warnings during their secret planning meetings. Facing decades in prison, the criminal alliance fractured right inside the courtroom. Nathan pointed a shaking finger at my sister, claiming she had viciously threatened to expose their affair unless he secured the genetic material. Brooke wept hysterically into her hands, insisting the disgraced lawyer had completely lied to her about my medical consent. Celeste shook her head in disgust, calling them both calculated liars. Then, the lead prosecutor clicked a button on the evidence laptop. The digital recording from my hidden microphone echoed through the high-ceilinged room, capturing Marilyn Cole desperately offering to sell her house if I dropped the charges. Every single one of them tried to save themselves by trading the secrets of the people they claimed to love. The presiding judge did not show an ounce of mercy during the sentencing hearing. Nathan Hale lost his law license forever, receiving a substantial prison sentence for conspiracy, forgery, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. The court ordered him to pay massive financial restitution, legally stripping him of any future right to control the medical records or financial accounts of the child he helped create. Brooke received her own heavy sentence for fraud and conspiracy, though the judge mercifully delayed her surrender date until her postpartum medical recovery concluded. Celeste Ward went to a federal facility and received a lifetime ban from the fertility industry. Marilyn Cole faced strict probation for her obstruction charge, resigning in total public disgrace from every charity board in the Boston area. Family court moved swiftly after the criminal verdicts came down. The family judge reviewed the DNA results, the fraudulent contracts, the original intent of the embryo creation, and the comprehensive report from the guardian ad litem. I was officially named the legal mother and granted sole primary custody. Nathan's parental contact was completely suspended while he served his time behind bars. Because the entire gestational agreement was based on a criminal forgery, Brooke lost any claim to intended motherhood. Any future supervised visits would be entirely up to the court, strictly based on the best interests of the child. When the heavy wooden gavel finally fell, I did not cheer or smile. I just let out a long, shaky breath. Stepping out into the marble corridor that afternoon, a frail hand caught the sleeve of my coat. Marilyn stood by the elevator bank, her eyes red and sunken. She whispered softly that the baby was still our family's child. I looked at the woman who raised me, my heart completely empty of the desperate need to please her. I explained that a family is not a title of ownership. My mother reached a trembling hand toward the empty infant car seat resting on my arm. I took a deliberate step backward, putting a permanent physical distance between us. "You chose the daughter who hurt me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I am choosing the daughter none of you will ever use again." Marilyn stood frozen on the marble floor, and I walked onto the elevator without looking back. Several months later, the autumn leaves started falling outside a much smaller house, located near the Children's Hospital. The corporate ethics board cleared my name completely, allowing me to return to my auditing career. Northbridge Reproductive Center established a massive victim compensation fund and a rigorous new verification protocol called the Consent Safeguard, successfully keeping my name out of the press just as I requested. Nora stood in my freshly painted nursery, helping me carefully hang a small silver frame on the wall. It held the original faded photograph of embryo code ACNH03. The heavy legal affidavit stayed locked inside a fireproof safe down the hall, never displayed as a morbid trophy of war. I sat in the rocking chair, placing my palm gently against my sleeping daughter's back. The stolen documents had saved the truth, but the difficult choices we made afterward were what actually created a home. Brooke had told me to step aside. In the end, I did. I stepped aside from the family that had used me and built one that never would. Sometimes the most painful truth you will ever have to learn is that blood does not automatically make someone family, and a shared history does not give anyone the right to cross your most sacred personal boundaries. When you grow up in a family dynamic where your daily sacrifices are expected and your genuine feelings are constantly minimized, it becomes dangerously easy to believe that true love requires endless compromise. From a very young age, you might be conditioned to believe that keeping the peace is always more important than your own mental and physical well-being. Society often tells you that you should instantly forgive unthinkable betrayals simply because you share a last name or a childhood roof with the people who deeply hurt you. But the reality of genuine love and healthy relationships is completely different from that toxic narrative. True love, whether it comes from a romantic partner, a sibling, or a parent who raised you, will never ask you to surrender your bodily autonomy, your future, or your basic human right to consent. You must understand that your life and your choices are not community property to be distributed among relatives who feel entitled to your resources. No one gets to claim ownership over your medical decisions or your hard-earned stability just because they share your DNA or stood by you during a difficult season in your past. Gratitude for past support is completely valid, but it should never be weaponized into a lifelong debt that forces you to endure manipulation, deceit, or emotional abuse. You possess the absolute, undeniable right to step away from the individuals who only value you for what they can conveniently take from you. Walking away from toxic family members does not make you a cold, cruel, or unforgiving person. Instead, it makes you a fierce, necessary protector of your own life and the lives of the innocent people who depend on you. Breaking away from an enabling parent or an entitled sibling is often an incredibly lonely journey, filled with moments of intense doubt and unfair public judgment. Yet this painful separation is frequently the only way to permanently break the destructive cycle of generational trauma. You cannot heal in the exact same environment that intentionally broke you, and you cannot reason with people who are committed to misunderstanding your boundaries to protect their own selfish interests. Building a healthy, safe, and truly nurturing home sometimes means leaving the people you grew up with entirely behind and writing a completely new set of rules for who gets access to your heart. True family is built on a foundation of mutual respect, radical honesty, and unwavering safety. It is found in the people who honor your boundaries just as much as they celebrate your generosity. When you finally stop setting yourself on fire to keep everyone else warm, you create the space to build a chosen family that actually protects you. Have you ever found yourself standing at that terrifying crossroads, forced to draw a hard line with someone you deeply love just to protect your own peace and sanity? How did you gather the courage to completely redefine what the word family means to you after a devastating betrayal? Please share your personal experiences in the comments below. Your unique journey of walking away, healing, and rebuilding your life from the ground up might be exactly the beacon of hope someone else desperately needs to find their own strength today.